Ah, my dears, sit here with me for a moment. Pull up a chair, let your heart rest a little. Today, the story I bring is one of those that seem to weigh a ton on the soul, but which in the end shows us how God's light finds cracks in the darkest places. Cracks that often seem like just mistakes. Today's story is about John, a good man with hands calloused from honest work, a man who only knew how to plant and love his wife, Mary. He had the smell of earth on his hands and simplicity in his eyes. But life sometimes plays tricks on us that defy our understanding. On an autumn night, one of those nights when the wind whistles sadly against the windows, a terrible crime occurred in their small town. A fire that took not only the old grocery store, but also the life of its owner. And by one of those cruel twists of fate, or perhaps by the malice of an envious heart, the finger was pointed at João. He who at that moment was at home, caring for Maria, who was burning with fever, was torn from his home. I keep imagining my son, my daughter, what goes through the heart of a just man when the whole world decides he's a monster. Can you feel it? The cold metal of the handcuffs on his wrists, the smell of mold and despair in that first cell, the sound of the judge's gavel. Guilty. One word that stole the sun, that stole the future, that stole João's name. Poor Maria collapsed on the courtroom bench. Her muffled sobs were the soundtrack to the longest day of João's life. 20 years. The judge said, 20 years. 20 years. That's a lifetime. It's watching your wife's hair turn white through thick glass. It's missing your own mother's funeral. It's feeling your skin age, not from the sun of the countryside, but from the pale light of a lamp that never goes out. João was taken to prison. The iron door slammed shut with a bang that echoed deep in his chest. There, in that instant, his ordeal began. He looked at the grey walls, felt the rough texture of the uniform they gave him. And the first question that sprang from his spirit was not of anger, but of deep pain, a whisper to heaven. My God, why? You know my innocence. You know. But the sky at that moment seemed made of bronze, closed. Silence was the only answer. He was alone, unjustly imprisoned, with 2 decades of darkness ahead of him. And the question that hung in that stale air, the question the viewer now feels in their heart, was, how does someone survive this? How can faith, such a small seed, sprout in soil made of concrete and injustice? João's long night was only beginning. The days, my dears, inside that place don't pass. They drag on. The first year was the hardest. João cried every night, hugging the thin mattress, smelling the dust and the dried tears of so many others who had been there. He saw the sun rise square, a pale patch of light that barely warmed the cold cell. He tried to pray, but the words seemed bitter in his mouth. The injustice was a knot in his throat that wouldn't untie. Maria visited him every Sunday. Ah, the visits. They were a blessing and a torture. Seeing her aging before his eyes, her hands once soft, now trembling and thin against the glass partition. They couldn't touch each other. They talked through an old telephone with the hiss of interference. Have faith, my old man, she would say, her eyes brimming with tears, forcing a smile that didn't reach her gaze. God is just. His time will come. And João would shake his head, but inside he thought, what time, Maria? What time? 3 years have already passed. 5 years. The other prisoners, hardened men, sometimes mocked that quiet man who read a Bible with a worn cover. God forgot you here, old man, they would say, and there were days when João almost believed. Doubt, my children, is a treacherous shadow. It enters without asking permission. 10 years had passed. 10. half of his sentence. João was no longer the same man. His hair was as white as cotton. His back, once straight with pride in his work, was now hunched. He no longer cried. There was a profound silence about him. He had learned to be invisible. He tended the small prison garden, and it was there, with his hands in the soil once more, that he found some vestige of peace. He spoke to the plants. They were the only ones who didn't judge him. 15 years. Maria now came in a wheelchair, brought by a niece. The fever of that night 20 years ago had left lasting effects that time had aggravated. João's pain was no longer for his lost freedom. It was for seeing her suffering, her loyalty, a whole life spent waiting for him. He had lost everything, his name, his dignity, his strength. The only thing left to him was a worn-out faith, thin as a spider's thread, but which, incredibly, had not yet broken. He no longer asked for justice. He no longer asked for freedom. He only asked God for strength to endure the next day. 20 years, 2 decades had passed. João was now an old man, forgotten by the system. His injustice was an old dusty file in a room no one entered anymore. The world outside had changed. There were things called cell phones, the internet. João was a ghost of a bygone era. Despair no longer screamed. He was a quiet, long-time resident, sitting in the corner of his cell. And the question remained, did God really remember a name, João, lost in a prison in the countryside? Or would his story end there, in that grey silence? And then, my children, something happened. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't an angel descending from heaven. The hand of God is often subtle. It moves in silence, uses small things, things that seem coincidence. The law school in the capital started a new program, a task force to review old cases, cold cases, more so that students could learn about archived processes than for any real hope of justice. And João's file, covered in dust and oblivion, fell onto the desk of a young student, a young woman named Beatriz. Beatriz was idealistic, yes, but she was also overwhelmed. She had dozens of files like this one. João's case was just another number. Arson resulting in death, 20 years, almost served. The protocol was simple. Check if there were requests for sentence reduction for good behavior and file it away. But something made Beatriz stop. She looked at João's faded photo taken 20 years ago, a frightened, confused look. It wasn't the look of a murderer, it was the look of a farmer. She herself came from the countryside. She recognized that kind of look. She read the file. It was simple, too simple. An eyewitness, a neighbor who had an old feud with João over a fence, who saw João running out of the grocery store. And that was it. The defense, at the time a weary public defender, barely contested it. Beatriz felt an itch on the back of her neck. You know that feeling you get that something doesn't add up. It wasn't logic, it was intuition, a discomfort in her spirit. She decided, against her supervisor's advice, don't waste your time with this, miss, the man has already paid, to ask to see the original files. Not the digitized summaries, but the physical boxes. When John was called into the consultation room, he thought it was some kind of problem. He saw that young woman with glasses, with a serious look. "Mr. John," she said, "my name is Beatriz. I'm reviewing your case." John just sighed. He'd heard this before in the early years. "Don't waste your time, my daughter. There's nothing more to be done. I only ask God to let me see Maria one last time." But Beatriz insisted, "Mr. John, the main witness, your neighbor, do you remember anyone else who was on the street that night?" John frowned, his grey brow aching. 20 years. It was like trying to see through a dense fog. "No, my daughter. It was dark. I only remember running home to my Maria. She was burning with fever." Beatriz wrote it down. The first mysterious sign wasn't evidence. It was a feeling, a discomfort in the heart of a young lawyer who decided, for a reason she couldn't explain, to look back at a case everyone had forgotten. What was she looking for, anyway, and what did that discomfort mean? That feeling, my dears, that itch in the back of Beatriz's neck, was the Holy Spirit fanning the embers. She went back to the college archives, but what she wanted wasn't there. She needed the inactive files from the João district court. She made the official request. 2 weeks later, an old cardboard box arrived, tied with string, smelling of mold and age. She opened it. There were piles and piles of yellowed paper, almost illegible in some parts. She spent hours, days, reading each testimony, each report. And then she found it. It wasn't proof of innocence, it was a strangeness. In the middle of the neighbor's testimony who accused João, there was a passing mention of another man. The neighbor said, "I saw João running. And a little before that, I think I saw Pedrinho da Venda, walking around there. But he disappeared." Pedrinho da Venda. That name wasn't anywhere else in the case file. He wasn't called as a witness. He wasn't investigated. He simply, disappeared. The first sign, Beatriz's feeling, now had a name. Beatriz felt her heart race. Who was Pedrinho da Venda? She began to do what big city lawyers call due diligence, but what in the countryside we call going after conversations. She used her weekends. She went to the small town of João. People barely remembered the case, but they remembered Pedrinho. A troubled young man. He lived by petty theft, owed money to many people, including the owner of the grocery store that was burned down. And the most important detail, he disappeared from the city the day after the fire. Vanished. No one ever heard from him again. The connection was made. Beatriz's feeling, the first sign, was now linked to a name and a mysterious escape, the second event. It wasn't by any means proof. 20 years had passed. Finding this Pedro would be like looking for a needle in a cosmic haystack. But now, Beatriz wasn't just curious anymore. She was angry, a holy anger. She went back to the prison. "Mr. João, who was Pedrinho da Venda?" João looked at her, his eyes widening for the first time in years. "Pedrinho? He was a complicated boy. He was always asking me for money. I gave him food. Poor thing, but he disappeared." Beatriz took a deep breath. The pieces were starting to fit together, not through legal logic, but through a kind of divine map. She still couldn't prove anything. She had two subtle mysteries. But now, for the first time, a small, tiny flame of hope began to burn. What if it wasn't too late? The mountain of injustice seemed insurmountable, but Beatriz felt she had found the first loose stone. This, my children, is the moment when the story takes a turn. It is here that the detail, the small, the invisible, changes everything. Beatriz, now driven by a certainty that did not come from within, made one last request to the court archives. "I want everything," she said. "Not just the main files. I want the annexes, the appendices, the preliminary investigations, the boxes of physical evidence, everything." The clerk, a gentleman about to retire, grumbled, "Young lady, that's in the basement. It must all be moth-eaten, but the law demands it." A week later, 3 filthy boxes covered in cobwebs and rat droppings arrived at her office. She sneezed from the dust. She opened the first, John's clothes from that night; the second, photos, illegible reports; the third seemed wrong. The label was torn. It said, Case 409B, but John's case was 408A. It was trash. It probably came along by mistake because it was next to it on the basement shelf. A mistake. A simple filing error. Beatriz sighed, frustrated. She was about to close the wrong box, but something, a piece of metal, gleamed in the dim light of her lamp. She reached in. It was an old, silver-plated lighter. along with it a small, sealed evidence envelope. And inside that envelope, a note from the investigator at the time. The note read, "Lighter found in the alley behind the grocery store, possibly belonging to Pedro da Venda, seen by witness X, the neighbor loitering around the area. Investigation suspended due to focus on the main suspect, João." Beatriz stopped breathing. The mistake in the process, the wrong box, the lighter, the note, Pedro's name, everything was there. The neighbor, in his official statement, lied by omission. He mentioned Peter casually, but to the investigator, he was more specific. And the investigator, focused on John, simply filed the evidence away. And that evidence ended up in the wrong box, where it remained hidden for 20 years. The hand of God didn't use thunder. It used a weary scribe, a dusty basement, and a torn label. The rest, my dears, was like a dam breaking. With the lighter and the note, Beatriz obtained a court order to track down Pedro, and they found him. He lived in another state, under another name. He was an old, sick man, consumed by alcohol. When Beatriz and the police confronted him, he didn't resist. He broke down and confessed everything. It was him. He went to collect a debt from the grocery store owner. The argument got ugly. He pushed the old man, who fell and hit his head. Desperate, Pedro set fire to hide the crime and fled, using his neighbor, who owed him gambling money, to plant the seed against João, his enemy, the day João left prison. Ah, my children, the air was fresh. The morning sun seemed like liquid gold. João stopped at the iron gate. He didn't run. He stood still, breathing. He felt the wind on his face for the first time in 20 years. He closed his eyes. That air, it was the scent of mercy. He took a step and another. And there she was, Maria, in her wheelchair, older, more frail, but with the same look. Beatriz was beside her, weeping silently. João walked to his wife. He knelt on the asphalt with difficulty, his old bones cracking, and, for the first time in 2 decades, he touched her face. His calloused hands, now cleansed of prison dirt, touched her wrinkles. And they said nothing. They only wept. The miracle wasn't the gate opening. The miracle was the mistake of a forgotten box which God had kept for 20 years, waiting for the young lawyer with the restless heart. Just look at this, my dear friends. 20 years, a lifetime of waiting. How many times during all that time must John have looked to the sky and asked, "Where are you, Lord?" How many times did Mary kneel on the cold ground pleading for justice and only hear silence? We're always in such a hurry, aren't we? We want the miracle to happen instantly. We want God to work in our time, to resolve our injustices now. But John's story teaches us a profound lesson about God's timing. God's plan, my children, is like a tapestry. Seen from below, from our side, it's just a tangle of loose threads, of colors that don't match, of knots and loose ends. It looks like a mistake. 20 years of pain. What sense does that make? But God is watching from above. He was weaving. He needed 20 years to pass. He needed a young woman named Beatriz to be born, grow up, go to law school. He needed a new program to be created at that school. He needed an old, tired clerk to make a mistake and pick up the wrong box. What we call error or chance, God calls instrument. What we call delay, God calls preparation. The lighter didn't appear in the first year, nor in the 10th. It appeared in the 20th, at the exact time, not a day before, not a day after. God's justice may seem to sleep, but it never dies. It arrives at the right time, using the most improbable means. Now I ask you, my son, my daughter, who are listening to me, perhaps with a heavy heart, waiting for an answer that doesn't come. How many times have you looked at a mistake in your life, a lost job, a blocked path, an inexplicable delay, and thought it was the end? How many times have you judged a situation as chaos without realizing that it was just God? Tidying up the boxes in the basement? John's faith didn't bring him freedom in a day. His faith sustained him, vivo for 20 years, until God's mistake could be revealed. I want to invite you to do something now, here in the comments, in this space that is ours for sharing. Have you ever experienced a situation that seemed like a terrible mistake, but that, over time, you understood was the hand of God working behind the scenes? Have you ever seen a coincidence turn into a miracle? Share your story with us. Let's strengthen our faith together by reading each other's testimonies. Your story could be the light that someone who is in their 20th year of waiting needs to read today. If this story touched your heart, leave your amen in the comments. Like this video so that this message of hope reaches more people. And of course, subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing these stories that nourish our souls. May God bless your waiting, and may He give you eyes to see the miracles hidden in the mistakes along the way. Peace be with you.